Here's something nobody talks about enough. The people who seem the most put together, the ones who are thoughtful, considerate, always two steps ahead, they're often running on empty. Not because their lives are falling apart, but because their mind never shuts off. It's 2 a.m. Nothing bad happened today, but their brain, it's busy replaying a conversation from 3 days ago and quietly asking, "But what if?" on a loop. And here's the wild part. The very thing making them exhausted is the same thing that makes them exceptional. But here's what nobody tells you. Overthinking isn't a flaw in your personality. It's a pattern baked into your brain's wiring. And once you understand exactly what's happening inside your head at 2 a.m., you'll never shame yourself for it again. In fact, by the end of this, you might realize that the way your mind works isn't something to fix, it's something to redirect. Let's get specific, because what you've been calling overthinking has an actual name in psychology. It's called maladaptive rumination. And before that sounds like a diagnosis, here's what it actually means. Your brain gets stuck in a loop, replaying the same moment, the same conversation, the same what if, not because something is wrong with you, but because your mind genuinely cannot find a satisfying resolution, so it keeps searching. What they found instead was that these individuals had unusually strong pattern recognition. Their brains were constantly scanning, picking up details others miss, searching for meaning in situations most people would just let go. Neurologically, here's what's happening. Your prefrontal cortex, the part responsible for planning, analysis, and self-reflection, stays highly active even when you're supposed to be resting. And layered on top of that is your default mode network, your brain's background engine, constantly generating an internal running commentary, reviewing, rehearsing, preparing for conversations that haven't even happened yet. In other words, your brain isn't broken, it's just built different, and it doesn't know how to clock out. Here's something most people don't realize. This pattern rarely begins in adulthood. For most overthinkers, it starts in childhood, specifically in environments where things felt unpredictable. Maybe moods at home shifted without warning. Maybe love felt conditional on performance. In that kind of environment, a child's brain does something logical. It starts preparing for everything. It thinks 3 steps ahead. It tries to map out every possible outcome because if it can predict what's coming, maybe it can stay safe. So that constant mental scanning wasn't a glitch. It was a survival strategy, a smart, adaptive response to a world that felt unstable. The uncomfortable truth is this. What we call overthinking in adults was once protection in a child. The nervous system learned to stay alert, to stay ready, and decades later, it still is. Not all overthinking is the same, and this distinction might change how you see yourself. Psychologists split it into 2 categories. The first is reflective rumination, turning inward to genuinely process emotions, examine your behavior. When it's balanced, this is actually a strength. It's tied to higher emotional intelligence, stronger self-awareness, and the ability to grow from experience. The second is brooding rumination, passive, circular. You're dwelling on problems without moving toward any resolution. This is where overthinking starts draining people, disrupting sleep, creating decision paralysis. Most overthinkers don't live in just one of these modes. They drift between them. Cognitive psychologists call this the illusion of mental progress. The mind is busy, but it's not actually going anywhere. It's just circling. Here's why just stop thinking about it is advice that almost never works. Every time your brain engages in problem solving, even imaginary problem solving, it releases dopamine. It's not a willpower issue. It's not a weakness, which means the solution isn't about forcing the mind to go blank. It's about redirecting that energy, giving the brain a different task, a different focus, something to engage with that breaks the loop. A 2013 study in psychological science found something most people wouldn't expect. People who reported higher levels of rumination also scored significantly higher on cognitive empathy. The exhaustion and the perception come from the exact same place, but here's the tension they live inside every single day. And yet, the more they think, the further clarity seems to drift, because the mind cannot think its way out of every problem. Some things need to be felt, some things need to be decided, and some things simply need to be let go. Not solved, just released. Here's what actually works, and it's probably not what you'd expect. Therapists working with chronic overthinkers have found that the goal isn't to eliminate the thoughts, it's to change your relationship with them. A therapeutic approach called acceptance and commitment therapy. Old pattern. This situation is dangerous. I need to figure it out right now. New pattern. My brain is generating a concern. That's what it does. Overthinking is not a flaw. At its core, it's a highly active mind that learned, for very good reason, to stay on guard. The goal isn't to silence that mind. It's to slowly, gently teach it that it's finally safe enough to rest. But it starts with understanding yourself, and that's exactly what you just did. If any part of this felt like it was describing you, drop a recycle in the comments. You'd be surprised how many people watching this right now feel the exact same way. And if you want to go deeper into how the brain shapes behavior, anxiety, and emotional patterns, subscribe, because we cover this kind of psychology every week in a way that actually makes sense. See you in the next one.